I hope this video finds you well and happy on your journey. Today I wanted to talk about grieving because I'm finding myself doing that. Here's why I realized I found myself grieving as I began to go through the process of healing and grieving my divorce. That's really how I realized that I was also healing from leaving the church, because I left the church in 2020. Our town shut down in March. I believe it was spring break, the week that we went. I left my job and I never went back. I also left the church. I didn't leave the church immediately. I'll say that we were doing what everybody else was doing, which was strictly online videos. And my ex-husband was, filming his sermons and everything, publishing online, which was kind of a welcomed break for us, because I don't know about most of you, but for my day at church would begin most of the time the night before, whether I was preparing for a meeting after the service, an appointment to speak with someone before that, or preparing a lesson, whether I was teaching it myself or preparing it for another teacher to have them teach, or as a worship leader, preparing in song and getting my mind right. I was busy, and I looked forward to the break that I received. Little did I know that 2020 would be the very last time that I would be actively involved in church. But now in 2024, I had done very little shadow work with myself in that area, because we're very visual creatures. So for me, I just kept thinking that, hey, I'm on this healing journey. I've been grieving my divorce and understanding and actually embracing, because grieving is difficult. Grieving is hard and it's ugly, and it took me some time. Even after I filed for divorce, and I remember, because my children were grown at the time that my husband and I separated, and I remembered as we were going through the process, because it did get really ugly between us. We have become friends now because we don't have the same expectations anymore, but as long as I don't have to depend on him as my husband, we're fine as individuals. But for me, at that time, going through it, I was not okay. And I remembered saying to my children, I am not okay. And I had to be okay with not being okay. And that is where I am right now in deconstructing my faith, because I never even looked at it as I was walking away from the church, because my entire identity was wrapped up in being a Christian. It is the longest relationship aside from my family of origin that I have ever had. I had it before I even knew who my ex-husband was, and I have probably spent more time with him than I've spent with anyone, to include my own parents. At this point, as I said, we were married for almost 3 decades, 29 years. So it was it was devastating when I began to just understand what it was that I was actually doing, which was separating myself, severing my connection in a yet another relationship. And I guess I just was not ready to admit that in my brain. But my body knew, whether we're willing to mentally admit something in our brains, our bodies know. And the body is still trying to process what is going on. And I kept saying, I feel this shift and I don't know what it is, and I feel funny and I feel like I'm lost and something is missing, and something really was missing because 4 years have gone by and I'm a different person. Before I even left my marital home, I literally got rid of all of those clothes. I did not want to be that person anymore. So on a subconscious level, I guess, I was preparing myself, but I still was not dealing with it. Because I was so wrapped up in trying to make sure that I got through the divorce. And I laugh at myself now because I remembered when I initially filed, I said to myself, I'm going to give you 6 months to get over this. And that was the silliest thing, because I was literally giving myself 6 months to get over something that I had been in for 30 years. And that's crazy. But I was doing the same thing by ignoring the fact that I didn't have the same friends anymore. My schedule didn't look the same anymore. I wasn't that person that people were leaning on anymore in that capacity. Who am I outside of this person? And because I've really been on a sabbatical, because I took off a lot of time from work, and even after my divorce, I decided that I didn't want to go back to work because I was not ready. I had spent so much time hiding from all the hurt and the pain. I needed to be able to decompress and be able to just breathe without having to wonder what was going to happen next. So I decided that I wanted to go back to work this year, and I'm doing that. But in the interim, there has been a lot of neglect on my part as far as dealing with the dissolution of my relationship with the church. Because while, yes, on the surface, I admit, of course, no, I haven't been to church, but I didn't really begin to deal with it. And I think that now, because I've gotten to the point where I am feeling better from grieving and actually acknowledging, what won't be as far as my marriage and the relationship that I had with my ex-husband anymore, I still couldn't put my finger on why I was feeling so sad. And today, I felt it. And I literally felt like I felt a pain in my heart, almost like my heart was breaking. And I just broke down crying, because most of it was crying because I could understand why I was feeling like I was feeling. It was more like a sense of relief. But I was also crying for the lost relationship and the lost friendships and just all of the camaraderie. Because again, on the surface, it seems so healing. It seems so nice and unassuming and, for your good. But when you think about the kind of private hell that you have to live in just in order to be in those types of relationships and feel that sense of neediness or whatever it is, I don't know. Thankfully, I don't feel that way anymore. But to feel like that and to be able to have to give up your authentic self just to continue to belong in that, it wasn't worth it for me anymore. And I hadn't really just faced that fact. I kind of brushed it off. It's almost like when you go into the emergency room and you see the patient with a gunshot wound or the pow wound versus the person that is coming in with, emotional distress. Which wound do you tend to first? And I think because I felt like the marriage was literally on life support and had been for so long, I tended to that one because it was the one that was the most debilitating at that point. But I also didn't realize just how grave the situation was with my relationship with the church, because it was just as fraught with all sorts of dysfunction and lots of church hurt, which over the years, you either become numb to it or you begin to become like those people. I'll never forget. This is an experience that I went through in the last church that I attended, and the first lady at the time, I ended up taking her place, but she had just been really horrible to me. And I had actually left the church for a while over it because I just couldn't do it anymore. And I was not afraid, but I was angry that nobody was calling this out and I was just supposed to take it. And it didn't matter who it hurt as long as her feelings were not hurt. And I began to call it out. And I don't remember what they said to me to get me to come back. And I ended up going back. But the most toxic thing that I remember her saying after I went back to the church is she told me, in her own way, that I'll understand one day because I'll do it to somebody else too. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. I sat there and looked at her for a moment and I just kept thinking, why would I want to put somebody through this torment? Why would I want to treat somebody, dismiss somebody, make them feel like they're just nothing? Why would I want to do that? But in her mind, it just made perfect sense. And I need to do a video on this, talking about how narcissism and toxic people and dysfunctional people and low vibrational people, they thrive in churches because nobody wants to call them out on it. We make so many excuses, and then the Bible is literally written for people to be doormats for the most part. We've been taught this, that we're supposed to turn the other cheek and forgive 70 times 7 and all these things that you're supposed to do when somebody is hurting you or just taking advantage of your kindness and seeing it as weakness. But the church is set up for that. Because anytime, I can't remember one time when I actually stood up and said, this is wrong, or I don't like this, or you hurt my feelings and this, that, and the third. And it actually ended up being something that wouldn't happen to me, or that person was talked to, or some sort of situation where it would have been sensical to either, and I'm not saying that you have to throw people out of churches. That's not what I'm saying. But when you sweep matters under the rug, when you fail to address things, it can only end one way. It's almost like when people get on substances. It can only end one way until the situation is corrected. And that's the same way that people are dealing with the church today. They just act like it's not happening. Or they get in in the pulpit and they talk about all this stuff. Or we have all these meetings where all these things seemingly get addressed, but nothing ever changes. And I was just ready, desperately ready for change.